Is there more going on with Yellowstone than they are telling us? Do we need to worry about a big eruption of the supervolcano Yellowstone? That would be catastrophic. So why am I saying this? Why am I asking this question? Well, you've probably heard or you have seen it in my last video, the hydrothermal explosion that just happened in Yellowstone, and tourists were running for their lives. They said it looked like a war zone with destruction of these wooden pathways and with like a strong explosion with black stuff and rocks being thrown around. And that was in the Biscuit Basin. That is located just north of Old Faithful. And okay, that happened. They say it's kind of normal that sometimes stuff like this happen, but it has never happened like this, that really tourists were endangered like this. Someone could have died, and you hear the ranger, I believe it was the ranger or some tour guide, even saying this in one video that was filmed by a tourist. Listen to this.
People could die. I'm going to say everybody wants to move out of here really quickly because we don't know how safe this is. This could be really, really dangerous. Feel free to grab my hand. Feel free to grab my hand.
Yeah, and you can also hear how frightened the people are if you listen to this.
Oh, I'm shaking. Look, everything is destroyed.
That was terrifying.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Now keep going, keep going. Oh shit. Holy shit. We are getting out of here.
And then you see these wooden walkways, how destroyed they are. Now basically that nice looking blue water, this pool has turned into a black, murky, muddy mud hole, right, with all the ashes. And they were like this smoke, these ashes were spewed up in the air several hundred feet. So this was nothing super minor. And is this an isolated incident, or is there more to expect? Well, guys, the USGS says no, this is not related to any magma rising up to the surface, and that we should not worry. There is no eruption of Yellowstone in the works. But I want to tell you what I found. And there has been something going on at Yellowstone, especially in the last year, month, that they have made findings. And, you know, should they have at least restricted the area a little more? Was it foreseeable, based on what I'm going to tell you, that something bigger might happen and endanger tourists? That is also a big question that I am raising. So when you see, look at the map where there is this Biscuit Basin, where there's Old Faithful, and then you see the Norris Glacier Basin. So it's not that far away. It's considered, it's basically the same area, right? So this spring of this year, guys, geologists have discovered a small crater, not a fissure, a crater at the Norris Glacier Basin. And this crater is based on their monitoring data that the crater appears to have formed during a minor hydrothermal explosion on April 15th in 2024, this year. So basically just roughly 2 months ago, another hydrothermal explosion like the one we've just seen yesterday. So should they have made a connection saying, oh, we found something, it might be active, it might be more active, should we keep people at a distance? Will they keep people at a distance? Now, that is also the question, guys. You know, I'm not into any conspiracy theories at all, but I want to point things out to you, like I am doing it with Iceland and the Blue Lagoon, because those guys are really, really taking a risk by being open till the last minute, then have all their tourists evacuated while the eruption's already going. In many cases the skies are turned red. So they never, although here the geologists did warn and say next eruption in a week, next eruption in a few days, they never closed down because the money from their commodity, the tourists, is so important. So I'm not implying that the management of Yellowstone National Park is doing something similar. I really believe probably this came as a surprise for them too. But you know, we have to wait in the coming days and weeks what the scientists, geologists, geophysicists are saying. Should they keep tourists at a distance? But should they only keep distance from that one spot where the big explosion happened, or what is happening at Norris Geyser Basin? You know, we have to say that these hydrothermal explosions, they are really an underrated hazard in Yellowstone National Park. It's people are maybe now more, but they were not really aware of that. I mean, they see the steam fountains, these fumaroles and the geysers, and yay, it's spitting up in the air. But what just happened yesterday, this is like White Island category, something similar as what happened on White Island in New Zealand. That was an island, volcanic island, and they were bringing tourists in a boat on that island. And then there was this explosion that looked similar like what we've seen yesterday. White Island, the one was bigger, but you had that pyroclastic stuff being blown out. You can't outrun these explosions because the rocks move really, really fast. And you see it also in the video that was made yesterday, how fast these rocks are flying. And they're quite the size. If that hits you in the eye, on your head, or multiple, we know that a hiker in Italy, if you're following my channel, you've probably seen the video about Stromboli that keeps erupting quite out of the ordinary right now. In 2019, there was an explosion like that, and a hiker was killed because he was hit by these rocks. They were being shot out by the volcano like bullets, like rockets, right? So this is dangerous. It is. So underrated in national parks, especially like Yellowstone National Park. And we have to really say these are not volcanic eruptions. This is a volcanic area, but it's not a volcanic eruption. It's basically a sudden episode of water flushing to steam underground, right? This is what's going underground. Hot gases, hot steams coming up to the ground. So small hydrothermal explosion happen almost annually at some place, somewhere in Yellowstone National Park. So there was an explosion in 1989 of the Pork Chop Geyser. Like every few thousand years, large ones can also occur. And of course, we're worried about that, right? So Yellowstone National Park is also home to, and now listen to this, to the largest known hydrothermal explosion crater on Earth, right? So these hydrothermal explosions, if you hear that word, you should really connect it with Yellowstone from now on. Mary Bay, it is called. It's on the north side of Yellowstone Lake. You can see it here on the map. And it's about 1.5 miles. It's spreading 1.5 miles across. That's roughly 2.4 kilometers. And it formed about 13,000 years ago. But it's quite impressive if you look at this. And many tourists, if they just walk through Yellowstone, they're like, oh, this nice blue water, isn't this pretty? And then the bubbling stuff and the fumaroles. But you have to be aware, how was this formed, right? So, you know, I'm always like, when you drive through Oregon, especially southern Oregon, like Klamath Falls, it's a beautiful area, right? And you know probably of Crater Lake, so you're thinking, yeah, that lake probably has its name from something. And you know, there's the Pacific Northwest Ring of Fire, there's lots of volcanoes, and then you see a road that says scenic lava field road and stuff like this, right? I'm always checking out nice areas where I'm thinking, oh, would it be nice to have a farm there or something, right? But then it always rings a little bit the alarm bell if there is a scenic lava field route, because a lava field has to come from something. And you know, many people always have the impression, that was in the past, this is how this area was formed and yada yada, no problem. Remember Iceland, if you watch my channel, what's going on the Reykjanes Peninsula right now. It has been dormant for 800 years. It's been covered with lava everywhere. If you're in the Blue Lagoon, if you're swimming in that outdoor pool, you know, you're surrounded by these lava fields and it's rustic and it's nature and it's beautiful. Well, the Reykjanes Peninsula has woken up after 800 years of dormancy. So there's a shallow magma chamber right underneath the Blue Lagoon, and it keeps erupting since November 10th last year, close to the Blue Lagoon, creating these eruptions with new lava fields that spread out 7 square kilometers, 9 square kilometers in one eruption, threatening the town of Grindavik, burning down homes. So we're waiting for the next eruption there, by the way. Check out my Iceland playlist if you want to learn more about this. So for me, you know, since I'm watching this so closely, if I see scenic lava field route, I'm like, nope, I don't think I want to live near that, because you never know when Mr. Volcano or Mrs. Volcano wakes up from their sleep and then has to do a little burp or something, and then you sit there. So nope, thanks. Beautiful areas, I mean, stunning, right? Hot springs, and it's just beautiful. Don't be afraid to go there, but watch my channel and listen to the signs. And there's another channel, by the way, that gives good warnings about earthquakes. That's Dutch Sins. Hi, Dutch. He always does great predictions about earthquakes and gives you good overviews of what's going on Earth. So check that out as well. So 13 years ago, the biggest hydrothermal explosion crater, Mary Bay. So that's why historically they have installed monitoring stations in the Yellowstone region outside these thermal areas to avoid like the noise that's caused by all the boiling water and all the stuff that's going on there. That's what the tourists like to see. So that noise can make it hard to detect small earthquakes and subtle ground deformations, right? The ground deformation is something is rising up, magmatic fluids, hot steam, hot water, the ground keeps rising, or the ground keeps subsiding if something's coming out. And usually you want to know about this to give out early warning signs. Scientists have called in 2022, in 2023, for a volcano and earthquake monitoring plan for the Yellowstone caldera system. And they highlighted the importance of installing geophysical monitoring stations in these geyser basins so that they would be able to identify explosions that might otherwise go unnoticed, because if there is an explosion, that's a very visible warning sign that maybe something else might be going on. So they say they don't want those to go unnoticed, but they also might even detect precursors that could serve as an early warning of an impending hazard, like we saw yesterday, because then they could have closed down the area and said no tourists, no access. It was kind of a miracle that nobody was injured. So they did. In September 2023, they started to install the first station in the Norris Geyser Basin. And then in May 24, when geologists were doing field work at the Norris Geyser Basin, they discovered the small crater a few feet across, like 1 to 2 meters across was that crater, and it was surrounded by fragments of silica sinter and disrupted ground. So something must have happened at that crater, and a crater doesn't form from nothing. And this is important if you're dealing with a system like Yellowstone. Let's say in Campi Flegrei in Italy, that supervolcano there, if something like this comes up there, ooh, that's scary because there's more than 3 million people at risk. Yellowstone has no settlements in direct proximity, although people will be affected up to the west coast of Canada, the west coast of the US, and in the middle US. But we don't have like basically more than 3 million people living on that volcano like we have in Italy, and it's rumbling there, and there's just another earthquake swarm. So check out my channel, check out my videos if you're interested in that. So but let's talk about that crater a little bit more. So the really precise location of that crater, you can also see it here on these aerial pictures. It was located, it's called Porcelain Terrace. It's near the western edge of Nufar Lake and above the Porcelain Basin on the east side of the Norris Geyser Basin. And you can see where basically that location is. There are some boardwalks close by. In this other picture here, you see Porcelain Basin, you see Nufar Lake, you see Porcelain Terrace. So this is the area where that crater is, and this is accessible basically by some boardwalks for tourists. And you might wonder, can they tell us when this crater was formed? Well, they can give us a time frame, because the last time that a geologist had visited that area, that was in September 2023. So now it did show up all of a sudden. So something must have happened in that time frame. And that's why I think it might be connected to what we've just seen yesterday, that other explosion. And they're also saying that this area had been exceptionally active during the prior 2 years, with enhanced runoff from thermal features on this terrace there, the Porcelain Terrace, and it was flowing into Nufar Lake and causing the water level of that lake to rise significantly. So something's going on. So again, are they telling us everything? Why weren't they a little bit more careful? Because what happened yesterday is basically not far away, and it was luck that no tourist was injured or burned from this. We've seen reports there were people that had elderly people that are not good on foot on these wooden walkways, and they were separated during the explosion. Thankfully, nothing happened. They found their relatives, but you know, this was the situation. I guess because when it came May 2024, the features in this area were said to be quiet, and they said no water was being emitted. So maybe they thought that's about it. No need to worry any further. They are saying that after an examination of high resolution satellite data, they came to the conclusion that these data indicated that the thermal features on the Porcelain Terrace went from being very active to mostly dormant between April 2nd and April 21st this year, 2024. So they're saying that the new crater and the disrupted ground were too small to be visible in these images, but the timing of changes to the nearby thermal features provided a starting point for them for examining monitoring data for signs of such an explosion. Good thing they did have this new hydrothermal monitoring site at Norris Geyser Basin that did or does include not only GPS and seismic sensors, but also an infrasound array which can detect the strength and the directionality of low frequency acoustic energy. So it can detect if something's going on. And here it comes. That's the interesting part. On April 15th this year, exactly at 2:50 6:56 p.m. local time there in Yellowstone, the station did record a strong acoustic signal from the direction of that new crater. And look at this signal so you can really see how it starts spiking. So the seismometers that they had in the region also recorded a signal, but since they were at a further distance from the crater, so based on that distance that they have, the signal was moving at the speed of sound and not at the speed of a seismic wave. So faster. So evidence that the signal was caused by a surface event and not an earthquake, because it had the speed of sound. And that's what we're saying. These hydrothermal explosions are fast and violent, explosive. And that's why scientists say you can't outrun that. They couldn't outrun it at White Island either. And there's a place in Iceland where they bring tourists that could cause something like this as well. Askja. The geologists are warning, right? That in another video, check out my Iceland playlist. So we're getting closer to what's going on here. But the problem is, basically, there were no obvious, immediate precursors to this explosion in their monitoring data. And that's a problem, because then you can't warn people. So they're saying it might be that no changes occurred, or perhaps they were too small to be detected by these stations. The closest station was about 1,640 feet. That's roughly 500 meters away. So maybe they should have, but you can't build a grid of a station every 100 feet or something. That costs a lot of money, by the way. But they're saying the data that were recorded, without a doubt, identified this explosion, which is the first time that such an event was recognized using geophysical data in Yellowstone National Park. So that shows you how little development we have at the moment in this area of science, right? That's why the geologists and seismologists can't predict earthquakes or eruptions precisely, or sometimes not at all, right? They can only, if Shizzy already has hit the fizzy and it comes with a lot of earthquakes, they can say, oh, something is coming. Sometimes the warning time is 0, it's 30 minutes, a little bit, right? But they can't give us enough warning so that you can be 100% sure that everyone is safe. And that's the problem. And that's why what has happened yesterday has happened. So they're saying, with this as an example, they think it may be possible to design alarms that can detect future similar events at the Norris Geyser Basin using this new monitoring station. But as we've seen yesterday, you need more of these stations, right? If you put tourists in these areas, they should have these stations there as well. Definitely, in my opinion. Let me know what you think, guys. So they're also saying that this discovery that they made of this crater and what has been going on there demonstrates the utility of continued expansion of hydrothermal monitoring in Yellowstone to detect similar eruptions in the future. And they're saying it here, not only in the Norris Geyser Basin, but also in these other thermal areas. So I think that probably after yesterday that they will install instruments like this at the explosion site, yesterday's explosion site. Probably that'll be the first place where they put new equipment in, because there's another thing that you need to know. That Norris explosion, that recent explosion in the Norris Geyser Basin that completely happened without their knowledge at first, right? Or without a warning, occurred only about 160 feet, that's only 50 meters, from a boardwalk. From the same boardwalk where the tourists were on when this thing exploded yesterday. So same thing. Someone could have been seriously hurt by this. So they need to get their ducks in a row with these boardwalks. Maybe not even let the tourists get that close at all at any time. So guys, if you plan to go to Yellowstone, just be aware of this. Be mindful, right? Don't bring people that are not good on foot or have no quick reaction time, or wheelchair drivers, or, you know, I wouldn't really. There's enough videos that you can look at YouTube or television. It's not worth it, in my opinion, right? There's always adrenaline junkies and risk takers. One thing we have to say, that explosion that happened there at the Norris crater, thankfully, even if there would have been tourists on that boardwalk, it was too small to have ejected debris to that distance so that it would have reached the tourists. Other than yesterday, the mother-in-law that they lost that went in the other direction was completely covered with mud. It was just lucky that she wasn't hit by these rocks. And they were also lucky that at the Norris Geyser Basin, this explosion occurred during a time period when much of Yellowstone National Park was closed. That was also good. It was closed because it was winter, and usually they don't let visitors in that area in the winter. But what's the takeaway from this event? It emphasizes the importance of following the park guidelines. That's what they're saying, and staying on the boardwalks. Don't go off track, because there's hot waters, there's hot mud pools, you know, gases, everything. Just stay in restricted areas, on the designated trails, especially when you're in these thermal areas. And you know, it is very hazardous there, even small steam explosion. And you know, this is a hazard that they need to increasingly target for monitoring, and they're saying that they will. But that's something that will happen in the years to come, right? So let me know, guys, do you want me to dig deeper into the Yellowstone topic? Let me know. Are they telling us everything? Because we know there's been repeated earthquakes and rumbling, and they're all saying it's normal, don't worry about it. I know there's some people that say it is not normal, it is above normal, we should worry about it. Should we, guys? Let me know your opinion. Do you worry about it? I mean, I hope we don't have to worry about it, because I'm too close to this thing. So that's the last thing that I need right now. But if you want to know more about what happened with the explosion that completely destroyed the boardwalk and turned everything into a war zone, check out the video. I'll put it in the end screen. There's more weird stuff, especially in the US. Sinkhole Alley in Florida, more than 30,000 sinkholes that swallow up subdivisions, car dealerships, Olympic swimming pools, that swallow up people while they're sleeping. So we're not talking about tiny holes, we're talking about holes that can be as deep as 500 feet. So that's a scary one. Maybe you didn't know about this. Think about this on your next Florida vacation, because this is massive. This is all over the place in areas where you not think this. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. I just saw you buy me coffees on my buyme.coffee website. I'm so grateful, guys. You know, I'm using this to support my farm, my horses, my doggies. So I'm very, very grateful. It helps a lot. And for your supers that you're giving me here on YouTube, you guys are awesome. I couldn't do this without you guys. So thanks for that. Thanks for watching. Leave this video a like if you can. It helps my channel as well. And I hope I see you soon in another video. And if you're bored, as I just said, check out the end screen. I'm out of here, guys. Rudy wants to go for a walk. Bye-bye.